What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. So I thought I would continue with my top 10 list by power forwards. So at number 10, just do a brief recap. At number 10, I had Dolph Shays. At number 9, I had Kevin McHale. Number 8, Dan Essel. At number 7, Elvin Hayes, the Big E. At number 6, I had Dirk Nowitzki. At number 5, Kevin Garnett. At number 4, I have Bob Pettit. So at number 3, I have Sir Charles Barkley. All right. Charles Barkley never won a championship, but I always attribute that to a couple of things. Number one, in his prime years, the late 80s into the early 1990s, when he was with Philadelphia, he had terrible teams. He didn't really have much to work with. But I thought that despite that, uh, he carried some pretty poor teams still to the playoffs. You know what I'm saying? Um, Individually, he shined. But to try to carry that team deep into the playoffs was a task that no superstar, no individual player could achieve. And another reason why he didn't win a championship is when he finally did play on teams that were championship caliber, um, you know, fate got in the way, whether or not it was Michael Jordan or Kim Olajuwon or maybe even Shaq and Kobe toward the end. Um, that John Stockton shot, whatever it was, he just was not able to get over the hump when it comes to a championship. But he is a top 50 all time player. I think he's a top 20 all time player, personally. I think peak for peak, there's an argument to be made that he's the greatest power forward ever as a player. Now, if you include player and resume, I think it's indisputably Tim Duncan. But if you're talking about just as a player, Charles Barkley has a case. He was a great scorer. Not a great outside shooter, but he could knock it down from that range, especially considering the area he played in. He had a decent mid-range game. He developed a decent mid-range game. He was unstoppable in the post when he was younger. Um, he shot nearly 55%. Oh, he shot over 54%, I think, from the floor for his career. 54.2%, I think. So he was very efficient, one of the more efficient players in the NBA, despite being only 6'4" at the forward position, power forward position. Um, Despite his size, he was probably a top 10 all-time rebounder, pound for pound. Uh, Pardon the pun. He's the shortest rebounder uh, leader in the history of the NBA, at only 6'4" and a half. When he led it, the NBA rebound during the 86-87 season. And in his career, he also won Olympic gold twice. He was probably the best player during the tournament in 1992 in Barcelona, and he was the veteran leader in '96 on the Olympic winning team in Atlanta. So Charles Barkley has two Olympic gold medals, and he of course has a league MVP for the '92-'93 season, his first year with the Phoenix Suns. And an argument can be made that he should have won league MVP in '89-'90 over Magic Johnson. That's, I think, the closest MVP race in the history of the NBA. It went to Magic by a uh, very small margin over Charles Barkley. But Charles Barkley was born in Leeds, Alabama in 1963, the same town that Tariq Nasheed was born in. Leeds, Alabama, when he was growing up, was a very conservative, very, um, I guess, pretty racist town. This probably has a lot to do with why Tariq Nasheed is the person that he is. And unfortunately, it has a lot to do with why Charles Barkley became the person that, he became. It's like with black people, with us, dealing with that experience can make you one way or the other. I don't want to go too far into that or dealing with that can make you one way or the other. Um, Charles Barkley, as a kid, had a love for three sports, I think: basketball, baseball, maybe initially, and football. He eventually gravitated toward basketball. In high school, he was initially too short to be to be on the team. He didn't make varsity as a junior. I think he was only 5'11" as a junior. But his senior year, between his junior and senior years, I believe he had a tremendous growth spurt where all of a sudden he was 6'4.5" and 270, and he made the team. And not only did he not make the team, he became a star player. The talent was always there. He just was not always touted. He was not as heavily touted as your average star player. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact of his size. Charles Barkley, coming out of high school, was 6'4", 270, 280, and getting bigger. And when I say getting bigger, I don't mean height wise. So that probably scared off a lot of scouts, the fact that he was so overweight. Maybe even seeing him as something of a novelty. Um, but despite the fact that he was so heavy, he was very quick and strong and fast and powerful out there. He could jump out of the gym even though he was 300 pounds. Um, he could run the fast break as well as anybody. Titties flopping, belly hanging. Um, he literally was titties over titles. But um, but he it didn't seem to affect his play. Now he went to University of Auburn for 3 years, where he starred. He put up pretty dominant numbers, I believe it was something like, off the top of my head, I want to say he averaged something like 20 points and maybe uh, 14 rebounds or something like that. I know he shot a very high percentage, almost 70% from the floor. And after 3 years of college, he decided to go pro in 1984, which is one of the great drafts in the history of NBA. Of course, that draft included Michael Jordan and Hakeem Olajuwon. I think Charles Barkley was selected fifth overall in that draft, if I'm not mistaken, by the Philadelphia 76ers. If memory serves me correctly, Charles Barkley did not want to be on the Sixers. It might have had something to do with the playing time. That team was already loaded, so he knew he probably wouldn't have got a lot of time. So, you know, in an effort to sort of get waived by that team to go somewhere else, he decided to not stay. I guess not to condition, and he went on a pizza and burger binge. And from the day he was drafted, when he was 284, to the time he reported to camp, he gained something like 20 pounds. He was over 300 pounds. And this, plus his attitude, led him to start off his NBA career rather poorly. All right. Now, when he first arrived in Philly, they were not too far removed from being a great championship team. The 82-83 team went 65-17 and won and swept through the playoffs, save for one game against the Bucks to an NBA championship. When he arrived there, Billy Cunningham was still the coach of that team. They would go on to go 58-24 during his rookie year. And this is a team that had Moses Malone still, Maurice Cheeks, Julius Erving, the great Julius Erving, Andrew Toney, Bobby Jones, a young Sadell Threet, and Mark Ivoroni. His rookie year, Charles Barkley averaged 14 points and 8.6 rebounds, to go along with 1.9 assists, 1.2 steals, and one block. And he shot over 54% from the floor. He did this in just a little bit under 29 minutes of play. And he started off slowly, but during the season, he really began to pick up his play. And he started in 60 of the 82 games that he played. Now, the next year, the Sixers went 54-28, and Charles Barkley's role on the team began to grow. A lot of that because of the fact that the team around him was getting older every year. Um, by this time, Dr. J was averaging less than 20 points a game, and Andrew Toney was beginning to have, or he was already having the foot problems, which would eventually lead to his retirement in '88. Charles Barkley, his second year, averaged 20 points a game, 12.8 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 2.2 steals, 1.6 blocks on 57% shooting from the floor. All right, so Charles Barkley was certainly developing as a star. The 86-87 season would be Julius Erving's last season as a Sixer. Prior to the season, the Sixers pulled off one of the stupidest trades in the history of the NBA, where they basically traded Moses Malone, I think to the Bullets, if I'm not mistaken, for a half-eaten bologna sandwich and a Hubba Bubba. Charles Barkley, in his third season in the NBA, in 68 games played and 40 minutes of play per game, averaged 23 points and 14.6 rebounds, including almost 6 offensive rebounds per game. Charles Barkley led the NBA in rebounding this year, and he was the shortest player at 6'4.5" ever to lead the NBA in rebounding. He also averaged 4.9 assists, 1.8 steals, and 1.5 blocks on 59% shooting from the floor. All right. His effective field goal percentage was 61% from the floor. And Charles Barkley also had a knack for getting to the foul line. After this season, after retirement of Julius Erving, this was finally Charles Barkley's team. Unfortunately, everybody damn near was gone except for Moses Cheeks. This was not the same team anymore. Andrew Toney was basically done, and the Sixers were a very poor team. They only won 36 games that year, but Charles Barkley individually became now a superstar. Uh, this year, Charles Barkley averaged 28.3 points, going on with 11.9 rebounds, 3.2 assists, 1.3 steals, and 1.3 blocks. Um, the best player that he probably has a teammate was probably Cliff Robinson. Not the Cliff Robinson with the Portland Trailblazers, this is a different Cliff Robinson, who averaged 19 points and 6.5 rebounds. The next season, the Sixers went 46-36, and by this time their coach was Jim Lynam. This season, Charles Barkley played in 79 games, and he averaged 25.8 points to go along with 12.5 rebounds, 4.1 assists, 1.6 blocks, and 0.8, 1.6 blocks, 1.6 steals, excuse me, and 0.8 blocks, and he shot 58% from the floor. The 89-90 season was probably Charles Barkley's greatest individual statistical season, in my opinion, at least. And also what he was able to do that year. I think he should have won league MVP in 89-90. I'll tell you why. With a roster that included Ron Anderson, Scott Brooks, Leonard Copeland, Johnny Dawkins, who might have been his best teammate that year, other than Hershey Hawkins. Hershey Hawkins, Corey Gaines, Mike Jaminski, Lewis Lloyd, Rick Mahorn, Kurt Memphis, Kenny Payne, Dexter Shouse, Derek Smith, Jay Vincent, and Bob Thornton. All these great luminaries. Somehow, this team was able to win 53 games that year, and mostly came off of the play of their leader, Charles Barkley. That year, Charles Barkley averaged 25.2 points, 11.5 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 1.9 steals, 0.6 blocks, and he shot a career high 60% from the floor. Now, mind you, Charles Barkley was averaging 25.2 points per game, but he was shooting less than 15 shots a game. So that's why I talk about with the efficiency. He didn't have to take a lot of shots to put up a lot of points, and he's one of the most efficient players in the history of the league. And I think he should have won league MVP that year. The next year, 1991, the Sixers went 44-28. They finished second in the Atlantic Division. Charles Barkley had another great individual year, but Charles Barkley was by this time becoming very frustrated with Philly. They were not making the necessary personnel moves he felt to improve as a franchise, and they were wasting his best years. Um, by this time, the team had acquired Armand Gilliam and Ricky Green and Manute Bol, but still, this was not. And Mario Elie was on the roster, but was not used. Um, this particular year, Charles Barkley averaged 27.6 points, 10.1 rebounds, 4.2 assists, 1.6 steals, 0.5 blocks, and he shot 57% from the floor. Beginning this season, Charles Barkley was starting to try to expand his range, and he shot 28% from the three. And I think this was the year 1991, and this was around the time of, if I'm not mistaken, I think the All-Star game was in the, it was not too long after we entered the Gulf War. Charles Barkley, I believe, won the All-Star Game MVP that year in 1990-91. By 1991-92, they took a complete step backwards. They only won 35 games that year. They were fifth in the Atlantic Division. Charles Barkley wanted out of Philly by that time. Okay, Charles Barkley averaged 23.1 points, 11.1 rebounds, 4.1 assists, 1.8 steals, 0.6 blocks. He shot 55% from the floor. Um, he had a fine statistical season, but by this time he wanted to be out of Philly, and they would oblige him before the start of the 1992-93 season. Finally, in 1992, he was traded to a contender. He was traded to the Phoenix Suns, and his first year in Phoenix, they won 62 games, which was the league high and the most wins in the NBA, and it was first, of course, in the Pacific Division. Charles Barkley, a reanimated and rejuvenated Charles Barkley, played in 76 games that year, and he averaged 25.6 points to go along with 12.2 rebounds, 5.1 assists, 1.6 blocks, 1.6 steals, and one block, and he shot 52% from the floor and 31% from three. This was when Charles Barkley was about third, I think he was 29, 30 years old, and he was starting to become more of a mid-range shooter. So his field goal percentage started to drop a little bit, but it's understandable because he was no longer just scoring in the paint, but he was starting to score more in the mid-range and shoot from the outside, um, and try and become more of a complete player. Of course, they made it all the way to the NBA Finals. What a lot of people forget to tell you is that they were favored to win the championship against the Chicago Bulls in 1993, but Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, but Jordan went on a personal tear in that series, averaging 41 points a game, and the Chicago Bulls went on to win that series 4-2. And Charles Barkley would never again make it to an NBA Finals. Now, for the rest of Charles Barkley's career, I don't want to have to go through every one of his seasons, but for the rest of his career with Phoenix, the Phoenix Suns, from 94 to 95, Phoenix was still one of the best teams in the NBA. And usually, Charles Barkley rose to the occasion. For instance, in '93 in the Western Conference Finals, they went 7 games with the Sonics. Charles Barkley knew that he would have to, after I think he had a poor game 6, he knew he would have to play his best game for them to win against the Seattle Sonics in game 7. And in game 7, he dropped, I think, 44 points and grabbed 24 rebounds. Just completely dominated the game uh, in that way. And Phoenix made their second NBA Finals appearance that year. All right, so in '94 and '95, Phoenix, I think both years, lost the playoffs. I think it was to Houston in both years. And I think what really hurt Charles Barkley's legacy for a long time was the blown 3-1 lead in '95. Okay. Um, Back then, a 3-1 lead was something that you rarely saw blown. You rarely saw a team blow a 3-1 lead. You know what I'm saying? Um, you just didn't see it. And Charles Barkley even guaranteed that Phoenix was not going to blow their 3-1 lead against Houston, and he ultimately did. And that was seen as one of the big collapse in the history of NBA. I think what also hurt him was, if I'm not mistaken, in the deciding game 7, even though Kevin Johnson scored 45 points, I don't think Charles Barkley had a good game. And normally Charles Barkley would rise to the occasion in elimination games, but I don't think he did in that particular instance. And then the next year, with Kevin Johnson diminishing as a basketball player due to injuries, I think the Suns only won 41 games in '95, '96. And Charles Barkley he was still a superstar, but he was kind of falling out of the radar a little bit by that time. We think of power forwards. By that time, the perception was now that Karl Malone might be a superior player. Then you saw the arrival of Sean Kemp, that year. The Sonics went to the finals. Charles was still there, but you can clearly see now that with the injuries, the back issues, he was not the same force that he was just 2 or 3 years earlier. So then came the attempt at the super team. After the '95-'96 season, with Phoenix in rebuilding mode, he was traded to the Houston Rockets. Okay? He was traded to the Houston Rockets, and at the time, that was some big news. You know what I'm saying? It was some big news, and this was going to team him with Clyde Drexler and Hakeem Olajuwon. And this shook up the Western Conference because now you thought that this was like the mega powers times 3. Unfortunately, injuries to Barkley and Drexler derailed that team. I think it hurt their chemistry a little bit, and at stretches during that season, you saw age start to play a role. Had they played together 2 years prior, they would have won the championship in the sweep. It would have been no contest. But I think they came together arguably 1 or 2 years too late. But they start off the season 21-2. Charles Barkley was inspired that year. The first game that he played, I think, was against his old team, Phoenix, coincidentally. He grabbed 33 rebounds. He out-rebounded the entire Phoenix Suns team by himself, if my memory serves me correctly. I think Barkley had 33 rebounds in that game, which established a career high. And I think Phoenix Suns had like 29 or 30 rebounds. And in fact, that season, the '96-'97 season, I think Barkley averaged 13.5 rebounds, which was his highest rebounding average in the season since the '86-'87 season 10 years earlier when he led the NBA in rebounding. Dennis Rodman led the NBA in rebounding that year. I think it's something like 16 a game or something like that. Houston would go 57-25, and they would make it all the way to the Western Conference Finals, but ultimately they would blow a 90-77 lead in Game 6 of that series, and John Stockton would send them out of the playoffs. Afterwards, they were still a decent team, but they were no longer in the championship hunt. New dogs were at play. Utah was establishing themselves as the best team in the Western Conference. Shaq and the Lakers were probably the most talented team if you actually look at the roster, but their youth and experience hurt them in the playoffs. Houston was aging out, you know. Uh, 97-98 was Drexler's last year. After that year, Scottie Pippen joined the Rockets. By that time, Scottie Pippen was done as a superstar. It was a failed experiment. And I think in the 99 playoffs, I can't remember what round it was now. It might have been the second round. Can't remember what round it was now. But Charles Barkley had a valiant series against the Shaq and Kobe Lakers. I think during the regular season, he averaged something like 15 and 10 or 16 and 11. But during that series, he averaged 23 and 13, and he tried his best, man, but he just couldn't do it. You know, they just were not the same players. During the 1999-2000 season, early in that season, Charles Barkley suffered that devastating. I think it was it ACL tear? I think it was in his knee, which which appeared to be the ending of his career. But he was able to come back and play. I think the last game of the regular season, he scored a bucket. They got a rebound and a bucket, and that was it. That was it. You know, after that game, Charles Barkley announced his retirement after 16 years in the NBA. And starting in the 2000-2001 season, he became an analyst for TNT, and the legend began. Today, he still does it. Pisses a lot of people off. Now, as far as me and Charles Barkley are concerned, as a person, I don't like him, um, but I do find him funny. He's somebody I don't take seriously. Um, you know what I'm saying? As far as the shit he says, I do like seeing him get under Shaq's skin. You know what I'm saying? But as a player, man, he's definitely up there. So just look at his resume for a second. In 1993, he was the league MVP. He was 11-time NBA All-Star. He was a 91 All-Star Game MVP, five-time All-NBA First Team, five-time All-NBA Second Team, and 96 All-NBA Third Team. He was on the NBA All-Rookie First Team in 85. Like I said before, he led the NBA in rebounding in 87. His number 34 is retired by the Philadelphia 76ers. I don't understand why his number 34 is not retired by the Suns, because it should be. His number 34 retired by the Auburn Tigers. Two-time second team All SEC 82-83, first team All SEC in 84. Is the SEC Player of the Year in 1984, third team All American NABC in 84. He's on the 50th anniversary all-time team. Twice won Olympic gold in Barcelona in 92 and Atlanta in 1996. And he came close to winning Olympic gold in 84. I forgot to mention this, but Bobby Knight cut him from the team. Um, I'm reading about that. For his career, he scored 23,757 points, grabbed 12,546 rebounds, and dished out 4,215 assists. For his career, he averaged 22.1 points, 11.7 rebounds, 3.9 assists per game. One of the greatest players in the history of the NBA, in my opinion, the third greatest power forward of all time, Charles Barkley.